Welcome to conversation number 4 of the Corey Shepherd podcast. Welcome back to everybody who's been listening. Welcome to all the new listeners. Today's conversation is as a continuation of the conversation we had with Neola Zama. This conversation really is designed to shed some more light in a different area of mental health, given that October 10th was Mental Health Awareness Day. And I decided to get some people on to really help me and try and learn some more about it myself. So today we have Micah Dell-Miller, who is a clinical social worker and psychotherapist. And I'll give you some insight into how we get here, right? Because this is not my normal release time. You know, I typically release these things pretty early on a Friday. But this was an episode I was going to release next week. But given that I woke up this morning and I checking the papers and checking up on what's going on, only to see another headline or another article that says, close male relative of a woman who was found dead is now being charged and questioned. I say we had to start talking about this, and we're going to talk about it more and more. You know, so let me tell you up front, right? If anything is offensive or anything in this episode, I apologize up front, but I'm not going to not publish the episodes. And I'm talking about on my end there because Micah is extremely professional. She knows her stuff, but I think I have to, let me take it upon myself as a man to have these conversations and ask what would be probably the stupid questions, because these questions need to be asked and we have to put the discussion in the forefront. We can't continue sitting here while, how many headlines like these you read where a woman beheaded and a man tried to kill himself, or a man, the whole family dead and now the man commits suicide and it's everybody left mourning. You're seeing funerals on TV where two sets of in-laws, they're crying for the children and the grandchildren. I mean, we can't, this a part of us, eh? As far as I'm concerned, this is a part of our society. And if nobody don't want to talk about it, I will talk about it. Because we can't continue to go forward where we get enraged and everybody get incensed when they have a Shannon Banfield thing. Or I spoke about a whole long episode about the children already. I ain't going back into that. But we get incensed about it and then it fades away. And the conversation stop happening till it happen again and everybody get vexed and we post about it and we read and we drive with our lights on and we do all that and then it fade away. So listen, it's my responsibility. I taken it upon myself to keep the conversation at the forefront. So what started off as a discussion about the state of mental health care in Trinidad, I want to take it in because you'll see where it went and I'm going to continue that conversation and I'm going to get as much sides of the story as possible. Eh? So a little vex with me. Because you see domestic violence in Trinidad and Tobago, somebody had to address it. And if it take me talking to 100 therapists and 100 doctors who see people who dealt with physical abuse, or women who've dealt with it, or children who've dealt with it, or men who abuse their women, if it take me talking to all of them to try to figure out what is happening in this society, I'm going to talk to all of them. So give me all your forgiveness up front now. When I ask questions that sound stupid, I trying to figure this out. And the conversation cannot be backburnered until another one happens. Let we collectively try and see if we could get another one not to happen. And let people be here to get the help that they need, or let people be able to access the escape that they need if they're in situations like those, because the restraining orders not working. The restraining orders, they're not working. Everybody's seeing it. I mean, even talking about this be heavy for me, though. The restraining order's not working, right, guys? I mean, let me agree on that. So there must be some other way. And if it is we could use this platform to just keep it at the forefront all the time, let me see what change we could enact now. Let me see what we could affect. Let me see if we could move the needle on something, because I'm sure y'all agree with me already. Something had to change. We will continue to come here and we will laugh and we enjoy ourselves, because we can't let these times defeat us. But at the same time, we got to talk some serious things too and get this thing out there. So I'm open to recommendations as to who I should talk to about this or who you all want to hear from. I'm very, very open. I've already reached out to a few people who are very comfortable talking about it and I want to be able to publish those as often as I can. It's better we talk about it often and it do happen than it happening all the time and nobody ain't talking about it. So let me take that upon myself. Let me start. Before we jump into the episode, let me say the number for the domestic abuse hotline or domestic violence abuse hotline is 800-SAVE. 800-7283. And if you're in a situation or relationship where there's abuse or there's abuse of children in the household, I would encourage you to find a way to reach out to this hotline. If this is the help that we have in place, find a way to get the help that you need. If you yourself listening to this and you're an abuser, find the help that you need. You yourself should call the hotline and see if you could get some help so that we could contribute to saving the women in this society, because we're real worried about how much people die from COVID, But and everybody, that seems to be the center of the discussion. But in this country, and I guess everywhere else in the world, life going on as normal. And what we call it normal, real different to what some other people experience it as normal. And unfortunately, the numbers globally for domestic violence have been on the increase since everybody being asked to stay home. Keep in mind that what you call home as a place of comfort is a place of terror and strife for other people. So let me get into the episode and let's give Micah a call, because I need professional help talking to this. So let me see if I could get Micah on the phone.
Hello?
Hi, Micah.
Hi.
How's everything?
Everything is fine. Thank you for asking.
You seem to be keeping, I seen you busy on the gram during these COVID times. So I see you staying occupied. That's good.
Yes, yes. And I have some people who help me with my Instagram as well. So
Well, that's good. Maybe I should do that. That's that may be helpful. I think I'm too old for Instagram. I can't figure it out.
Instagram, exactly. That's exactly what it is. So I get some young people to help me as well.
Oh, that's good. That's good. So let me start here, right? I'd spoken last week to Neola Zama, who's also in your field. And we had a really interesting conversation about us both getting into therapy and how we benefited from it and how difficult it was to find somebody in Trinidad. And I remember when we spoke the first time, you were saying that you were from Canada or worked in Canada, right?
Yes. I would have migrated to Trinidad. So I was born and raised in Canada,
right?
But would have migrated to Trinidad in 2018.
And by that time, you're already in the field.
Yes. Oh, yes. Most definitely. I started my career, I think, in 2010.
Right.
Yeah, 2010. I would have started my career.
So what do you feel was the reason you got into the field? Any particular?
Originally I would have gotten into the field because where I'm from in Toronto is like a really notorious area, right? In terms of like high crime, right? And so like we'll refer to it as the hood or the ghetto,
Right.
I prefer the hood. So I'm from like one of those type of areas in Toronto. And so growing up with that, I always kind of wanted to do a lot of research, find out like what are the issues, why, this type of violence exists.
Right.
What is the historical background, what are the connotations, what are the nuances that have to do with this, and how can I, maybe provide a service or, create some type of program or just be a person who can give back to the community that I lived in. So originally it was like I wanted to do community work. I wanted to work with, specifically young Black males who, were involved in the criminal justice system.
And all this, I thought Canada was docile and crime-free.
Oh, that's what everybody thinks.
It's not.
No, most definitely not. We have our challenges. We have systemic racism very much embedded into our institutions.
Right.
And so in terms of the education system, specifically the education system, the criminal justice system, and the child welfare system, those three systems in particular are just embedded with systemic racism. Right. And so with that, unfortunately, we experience, because of those barriers, because of systemic racism, we have poverty, we have, low socioeconomic communities where, of course, that's where you'll find, that crime and that violence.
Well, it's funny, a guy, salute to Anthony Chumley, who lives in Canada. He's been really, really helpful for me with this podcast. And I talk to him all the time, and I learned a lot about Canada, just along the lines of what you're talking about from talking to him. He went to school with me here and migrated to Canada.
Okay.
And he talks a lot about systemic racism, which, to be honest with you, I mean, we know that anywhere in the world you go, you could find where black people have been oppressed and the
Yes,
history is written.
100%.
But I
Yes,
guess for me,
exactly.
for some reason, I see Canada as being just above the world's problems.
Yeah,
But
they
he
paint
talks
a
about
really
that all
nice
the time.
picture.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
they
guess.
paint a really nice picture for the outside world.
Hmm.
So they make it look like, they pride themselves on being quote unquote multicultural, right? Like
Right.
Toronto is one of the most multicultural cities in the world.
Hmm.
And so when you go to Toronto, you'll find all different walks of life, all different people from everywhere. And so with that, they pride themselves on saying, okay, well, we're so multicultural. So how could we be racist?
Yeah,
We
yeah.
accept all of these cultures. We're so accepting when it comes to immigration and stuff like that. So how could we be racist? But as I said, embedded in the institutions and embedded in the systems, that's where it is, right? So not until, let's say, if you're visiting Canada, you might not have an experience. Not until, your children are going to school where you realize, wait a minute, my black children are being marginalized. They're being ostracized. They're
Mm.
being, isolated. What is happening here? Or, you may try to get a job and because of the way you look, you might not be successful. Not until you experience those systems will you actually find, okay, well, this is what's happening here, right?
Mm.
But it is very much alive and well into our system.
Okay, gotcha. So your roots are Trini. Your parents Trini?
My father's actually Jamaican.
Oh, yeah, real Caribbean flavor is
Yes,
real
yes,
McCoy.
yes, yes, exactly. So my father's Jamaican,
Mm.
my mother's Trinidadian. So I was able to, I call it the best of both worlds,
I think so.
because I see Jamaica and Trinidad, they're really two Caribbean superpowers, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, being from those two islands, getting to grow up in the two different cultures, with the food, with the music, with the ambiance. And it was wonderful. It was definitely a wonderful mix and a wonderful upbringing with, being half Trinidadian and half Jamaican.
Nice. So what brought you back to Trinidad? I mean, your career would have been already started in Canada and you're doing the work you
Yes,
wanted to do. What made the
yes.
move?
So it was not really to do with my career, to be honest. I
Hmm.
didn't really move down here to start a business or, to even get involved into anything career wise. Um, I actually came because I would have inherited properties. And then I wanted my kids to experience the education system here because it's really structured, it's really grounded, and it's black. Like when my kids go to school, they go to school with people who look like them. And so I
Right.
wanted my children to experience that. And so we had the opportunity to come. So we did.
Oh,
We did.
that's interesting.
Yeah.
A lot of Caribbean people, I guess Trinidadian in particular, and maybe it's the same for Jamaica. See it almost the opposite. Like you want your children to be educated in quote unquote developed countries, or with a different education system. So it's interesting to see you did the reverse. That's really interesting. And how's that been going?
It's been going.
Going.
um, no, it's I would say, what to do is if you have the opportunity, you allow your kids to do maybe the primary school level in Trinidad
Right.
or the Caribbean, and then once they get to that secondary school level, then you can maybe do the abroad or developed country thing. Because what it is I've seen it where on the primary level, away, a lot of it is focused on social regulation,
Hmm.
less than the academics. Where in the Caribbean, it's kind of the reverse. It's less socialization and more of the academics on the primary level. And I think that's what the children need. I think that, the home is where you socialize your children, not at school.
Right.
Yes, they have the opportunity to meet friends and make friends, but at the end of the day, I want to socialize my child how I see fit. I don't want, the system being responsible for socializing my child how they see fit. Right. And so a way that is the focus of primary school is socialization. And then when you think about it, if there is systemic racism in the
Of
education
course.
system, right, how does a black child thrive in an environment where, the primary, focus is socialization, but yet that particular socialization wasn't developed for the black child?
It will be done on their terms, basically. Just
Exactly. So it's really difficult for Black children to thrive, in my opinion, in the education system in developed countries because it wasn't made for them,
ah.
right?
Hmm.
And so I would say again, the primary school education in Trinidad is 10 times better. It's more structured, it's more, catered. to, I think, our children, catered to, the things that they need in terms of that structure, that discipline, and that academic focus. Right. But then what I realize happens is, like, at the secondary school level, is that they don't prioritize critical thinking in the Caribbean.
No, very, very rigid
And
and
so,
academic.
yes. And so that's where I think the children now would lose out, is because as they get older and they start to think for themselves, they don't really have that ability to where the critical thinking is emphasized or it's encouraged. Right?
It's funny you say it shows up in two places, in my experience. When you move from secondary school to tertiary level for Caribbean children or youths or young adults, there's a big jump because you're asked to do the critical thinking at tertiary level. And it's almost like you have to learn it when we get there, a lot of us. And then when we enter the workforce, it shows up in big time again. And sometimes we seem to be like, we don't compare favorably a lot of times to somebody who would have gone through that system as you describe in a developed country. Largely because they can do presentations, they could speak clearly, they could get their points across, they could argue without being emotional. It's a big difference.
Exactly. So for me, I would say, again, if you have the opportunity, you allow your child to go to school in Trinidad or in the Caribbean at the primary school level. And then for the secondary school level, like when they're on to secondary school, that's when you would, migrate or, move them.
Jump.
You make the jump, right? Because that is where they would be able to get that critical thinking that's necessary for tertiary education.
Okay. So how has it been moving from a country like Canada in your profession to come in here?
Okay. So for lack of a better word, the culture shock punched me in my face. So is what I was telling people when I would have first moved down, because in Toronto, I was the most Trinidadian person ever.
Right.
Everybody knew me as Miss Trini. I would come down every year for Carnival. If they needed somewhere to stay in Trinidad, they would always call me.
Nice.
Or, I want to go to Trinidad. So people would always refer to me when it came to Trinidad. Right. But then when I moved here, what I realized is I had to question and I had to say, am I really Trinidadian? Because it's like, the culture is so different.
Yeah, see, man, come live with me. It's two different things.
It is two different things, And so that culture being so different, because at the end of the day, as much as I am, I identify as being of Trinidadian background, I'm born and raised in Canada, right? And the culture in Canada is very, very different from the culture in Trinidad, especially the Black experience, right? Because of systemic racism and because of things that you experience as a Black person in Toronto, being the minority, like it's we have our own experience. We have certain things where, like, my fist is always in the air. Because that's how that's how we identify. We pride ourselves. We have something called that Black pride because we have to.
Yeah, the struggle is real.
The struggle is real. And so when I moved to Trinidad, I realized, but wait, how come nobody's fists are in the air?
It's a totally different experience.
It's a totally different experience, So just with those type of things alone, that culture shock and just kind of trying to adapt to the culture, trying to assimilate, it's been difficult. It's been a little difficult.
Right.
And then in terms of being in the field, social services in Trinidad is very new, very, very new.
Right.
I think it's now recently becoming a priority. Right. And so in Toronto, social services is hundreds of years old. Right. So if you get into a job, if you, let's say, go work for example, when I first came down here, I worked for the Child Welfare Institution. So I worked for Children's Authority.
Okay.
When I first moved here, right? Our version of Children's Authority in Canada is called the CAS. Right. Same type of thing, child welfare, And so the CAS has been around for over 100 years, right? When I came down and I started working for the CA, at that time, they were about 5 years old.
Oh,
right?
The Children's Authority here?
Yeah. So now it's probably like 7 years.
No, wait. But there had to be some other institution there before.
No, there was no institution. So before the Children's Authority existed, what persons would do is they had the CPU. So they had the child protection unit in the in the police. The
Right.
police had the child protection unit, and then they had the court. So they would go through family court. So the institution, I guess, I shouldn't say there was no institution. There was a way of doing things, but there was no specific child welfare institution.
Gotcha.
So family court, between family court, CPU, and the homes, the
Right.
children's homes like St. Dominic's, St.
Right.
Jude's,
Right.
those
Right.
places, they took up that mantle. So they worked together as a system to deal with child protective issues. So they would kind of go through the police would bring it to court, and then court would like place children in the different homes based on the different scenarios and the different issues.
So the mandate
Right?
for the Children's Authority you're saying is broader
So
than
the
just
mandate
protection?
it's not it is protection, but now their mandate has become child protection. Now somebody is actually responsible for child protection.
I understand.
Before there was no real responsibility. So the court and the CPU, they had to take it up, because at that point in time there was no real responsibility. So it was like, okay, well, who's going to do this? So someone had to do it, right? And so it was given to the courts, and it was given to the children's homes, and it was given to CPU.
Right.
Because again, it had to be given to somebody.
So your role then would have been, I mean, you coming in so early, a lot of the work you're doing would be institutional, like developing the methods and everything, you mean?
Well, yes. Okay, so what happened is that they were about 5 years old when I came in. So it was still in its infancy. I think it's still in its infancy right now, but it was still in its infancy, where, yes, they had a lot of development still needed to happen. So at the time, like, I would have come in and a lot of units were missing policy development. There weren't policies in place yet, right? There was still a lot of lack. So certain things were developed, but certain things were not, and it was really difficult for me coming from, again, a place like Canada, where when you go into a workplace, there's no such thing as, you might be revamping policy, but you're not creating policy unless you're starting a new organization.
I understand what you mean. Yeah, when you come in so early, a lot of the work is just trying to, you're doing the developmental or building the institution.
Exactly. So that was a lot of our responsibility, was like we were kind of building it from scratch.
Right.
Like our unit, I worked for the child justice unit specifically because of my experience. So I worked out of the children's court, and a lot of it was like developing that role of the children's court, developing the children's authority's role within the children's court.
Wow.
So it was interesting. It was very interesting for me, but it was again really difficult for me, because I would have never experienced working for an organization that's already running, where you're kind of developing policies at the same time that your operations are running.
Yeah. You're fixing the wheel while the car's still driving.
Well, exactly, literally.
I think it comes as a shock to me, because the thing about it is this: like, we have, I mean, now we have major issues with the protection of children and children's rights in this country, in my opinion.
Yes.
And from a person who is on the outside, a non-professional lay person like myself, when you say that is an amalgamation of several different institutions trying to figure out the issues around children, from the outside, it seemed as though it's a unit all along. Now that you say this, it makes sense, because like, I could almost remember now that you're talking about this, the launching of a new unit and all that. But in my mind, that's just rebranding. I thinking that, there's some institution already existing to protect children. I mean, it answers some questions in my mind as to why we where we are.
Exactly. So there's like a really long way to go. So at one point in time, they had hired a consultant who had come from the States to help out. And he and I were talking, and he's from Trinidad, but he migrated back again to also, work in Trinidad and stuff like that. And he was like, I was like, in about 20 to 30 years, Trinidad will get it right. And he was like, I don't think it's in our lifetime.
Oh God, don't say that.
Yeah.
Don't say that.
Because I was like, okay, 20 to 30 years. I was giving it 20 to 30 years, but he was like, no, it's not going to be in our lifetime.
Right.
So there's a lot of work to be done in the social service sector. And I would think I'm going to chalk it up to, it's just social services is not a priority in Trinidad right now.
Well, this.
So, go ahead.
No, sorry. I was going to say that I have been as a Trinidadian who lived in Trinidad for most of my life, and I never lived anywhere I live outside was in the Caribbean as well. I've always been like kind of wary or defensive about people who live abroad, who come from Trinidad but live abroad like yourself, who
Yes.
come back to Trinidad and say everything here is the worst. But I'll tell you something,
Yes.
right? I've learned to. I guess this podcast made me have a different appreciation for that, because a lot of people who are abroad listen, surprisingly to me, and when I talk to them about their why they would listen to all these local issues, I got a sense that people genuinely, they might live abroad and be working abroad and have their assets and investments and families abroad, but their heart never leaves the country. So it's
Yes.
I'm starting to gain a greater appreciation for how invested people are who are abroad, but really just want to see Trinidad do much better. And in my opinion, if somebody who is a professional like yourself or the person who you just spoke about, who has experience in the field in similar countries, in countries that are more developed or more advanced with these institutions, to say something like Children's Authority, we're never going to get that part right, that is a real indictment on the future of Trinidad and Tobago. And I guess that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you as well, because when we first spoke, a big part of what we spoke about was domestic violence against women, which I feel is violence against children, or any violence in the household. The effect it has on children, I think, is enormous. And if there's no, or not a proper outlet for those children to deal with those issues, what does tomorrow look like for Trinidad and Tobago?
Exactly. And this is the thing. And I don't want to make it seem like there's not social services here. I don't want to make it seem like there's not people doing the work. There are NGOs. There are places like the Children's Authority. So the work is getting done, right?
But I guess where you're coming from,
Like,
though, the structure is what you're talking about.
yes, and people are trying. You know what I mean? It's not to say that someone's not trying, because the simple fact that, the Children's Authority Act exists,
Right.
things like that. The Children Act was revamped. The Child Justice Act was revamped. All of these things are being done. So it's not to say that somebody's not noticing that the work needs to be done. Someone's obviously noticing, hey, wait a minute, we got to do the work, right? But it's just, I think that we have to look at, number one, making social services a priority, right? So not I see other things as priorities. So in my time here,
right.
For example, the oil and gas industry, right? The oil and gas industry is a huge priority in Trinidad and Tobago, right?
It's the priority.
It's the priority, which is, again, that's not a problem, because of course the oil and gas industry is where the finances come from. Right. So I understand that it needs to be made a priority, right? But what happens in a time where we have COVID, oil and gas is no longer a world priority. Right. And then oil and gas is something that's not selling anymore. Planes are not flying.
Yeah, of course.
Right?
And production is low, the price is low.
Production is low, price is low. So what happens to a country like Trinidad, where we only prioritize oil and gas, but then the world shows us, wait a minute, this thing that you've been prioritizing for so long, I'm not going to make it a priority anymore.
Yeah, of course. And then it falls down to the people.
And it falls down to the people.
Yeah.
Right? And who suffer the most are the ones on the low or end of the low socioeconomic status, the ones who essentially need the social services.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I want to echo your sentiment as well, because I know some people who work in social services through the ministries for some time.
Yes.
And they it's not for lack of effort. It's not for not people who want to do the work or who've been, because everybody I know in your field, Micah, is overworked. Everybody.
Exactly.
And it's a sad thing. It shows like a guy, consultant too. This was total business when he had nothing to do with mental health or anything. But he came in to do some work for our company, and his view as an outsider was that, like, Trinidad needs 100,000 psychologists and psychiatrists.
Yes, 100%. Like, they need to. I just think that it needs to be on the higher level. It needs to be made a priority.
Yeah, right? I understand you.
And it not being a priority means that it's never going to be where it needs to be. So yes, we're going to have the services. The services are going to be there, but they're going to be subpar. right? They're going to be subpar services because people don't really care about, making it a priority. So it's like, okay, well, we have these mental health centers in the community. So, we're doing the best we can because we actually have them. But is anybody checking to really see, or is anyone really talking to the service users? Is anyone really talking to the service providers to see if those community mental health centers are, doing what they should be doing? If they are treating the persons the way, like, you know what I mean? Where's the research? And that's one thing that I don't think that we do in Trinidad is we don't do social service research.
Right.
And social services is based on research. You have to use the numbers in order to create evidence, in order to create programming. Evidence-based practice is like social work 101.
For sure. And I mean, that's right? Something fundamentally we need to change across all industries. Exactly. Evidence-based decision-making is not something.
Evidence-based decision-making. Like we can't, and this is my experience. My experience is that Trinidad would say, okay, best practice is happening in the US, in Canada, and in the UK, so we're going to do it too.
Yeah.
Trinidad is one of the most unique places in the entire world. How can you say, okay, these first world people are doing it like this, so we're going to do it like this too? First of all, in the first world, the majority is white people.
Right.
Social services in the first world are catered to white people.
Right.
In the Caribbean, the majority is not white people. So that's the first injustice that you're doing by your people is because you're using programs and services that is catered to people that don't look like you.
Right.
People that don't, have the same cultural nuances that you have.
Yeah, all the same problems.
Yes. I don't think that it's a problem to use best practice. I think you should use best practice. But I think what you need to do is you need to do your own research.
Yeah, for sure. So you could apply the best research to your own. So when you have the research and you apply the best practices, it's best of both worlds.
It's best of both worlds because you take best practice. You say, okay, this is what works. So this is what we see what works. You do research in your own country. So you say, okay, what are the numbers? What are the cultural nuances that we have? What are the things happening here? Then you take it, you merge it, and then you create services that are best for your country.
Yeah, I feel just the way you feel, and I've been here all the time. I think we're well behind where we need to be, and a big part of it really shows up for me in just talking to people in your field. Because a good friend of mine, Renee Popplewell, her mom I was telling you about her being in, and the thing about her is she reaches out personally to her network for help with different situations. And a part of the reason I wanted to do this and have a conversation with somebody like you is because this is my own conjecture now and no evidence behind it. It's just the way it feels when she calls me. It's like every single problem she calls with for help, it's around a woman or a child who's in a situation trying to flee a home. So there was one example of a lady who has 6 children. The guy is violent. Alcoholic and violent, and they finally figure out a way how to leave. And I get this sense, and I might be wrong, that she is working on this almost personally, going from institution to institution, trying to help out with housing, with this, with that, and the other. Her own network, trying to raise funds. And this is the issue that this woman is having. When you escape this abusive relationship, she got to her home and there was no electricity. So she's trying to raise funds personally to get to pay T&Tech for a pole. That this lady will have to pay for to get electricity to the house. And then when I hear stories like those, and I'm not talking about 20 or 30 years ago, I'm talking about now.
Exactly.
And these 6 children are supposed to be homeschooled.
Yeah, exactly. With no electricity.
Or online schooling with no. Exactly. It's like this is the starting point. So even as I see,
this is the starting point. Exactly.
So many people complaining about laptops and stuff, which is an issue. I'm not saying those things are not issues, but look at where some people start point is.
Exactly. Not even electricity, right?
Yeah,
with 6 children.
Is something else. So, I mean, as we talk domestic violence, the thing about it is, I've seen. It took me a long time. I mean, since the first time we spoke to now, to process some of these stories that have been happening in the newspaper. And they're not new, but I find that sometimes they say if you're exposed to something enough, you get jaded.
Yes.
I think the way I'm jaded is that when I see stories like those, I can't read it for a while. I have to let the story get its thing and go through social media and all the comments and all that. So sometimes it takes me 2 or 3 weeks just to see what happened. And that article I'm referring to is a beheading of a woman in penal earlier,
Yes, yes,
couple months
yes,
ago. Oh no, a couple
yes.
weeks ago actually.
A couple weeks ago, yeah.
Yeah, and it made me realize that we have to as a society start by talking about things. I feel like there's some
Mhm.
conversations that we refuse to have. So better I start to have it publicly
Yes.
because we can't live in a society where half the country is afraid of the next half of the country. So if women and children are so afraid of our men in our country, and like you say, Trinidad and Tobago is a very unique space. So I'm not talking to the rest of the world. I'm talking to us home here.
Yes, exactly.
It's like, what are the things that we have to fix? So she's Reshma Kanchan is her name. Laltu Trace Penal, beheaded. And I thinking
Yes.
about what I thinking from my own perspective, and maybe that's, I don't know if that's good or bad. Like, what a woman could do so that make you feel
Yes.
like this is the
Yes.
best option, and we've seen it over and
Exactly.
over again. You
Yes,
kill your wife, you
exactly.
kill your children. There was one just of maybe in June there, where a man killed the whole family, and I think this guy attempted suicide, but he's still alive, so he'll have to
But
answer
he's
for
still
that.
alive. Yes, exactly.
So where are you on this? Is there so much for me to figure out? I don't know what are your thoughts on the whole thing and where we are as a country where domestic violence concerned.
So I guess I would start when um I was doing research into um suicide,
Right.
because what I do is I write blogs sometimes to put on my website.
Okay.
And so I was writing a blog about suicide, but I tried to make my blogs most relevant to Trinidad,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because this is where I am and this is the population that I'm writing for. And so I was doing research into, okay, what does suicide and suicidal ideations look like in Trinidad?
Right.
And so kudos to Dr. Richard Hutchinson,
Right. That's you.
right? He at UWI, kudos to him, because in doing my research, he is the most published person in Trinidad in terms of mental health, right? No one is more published than him,
Right.
right? Well, in terms of what I found, maybe there are,
Okay. Yeah.
but in terms of the work that I found out there, he's the one writing, he's the one doing the research, and he's the one writing
Right.
about it, right? And so kudos to him for giving us, literature
Sure.
to look at. Kudos to him for doing the work and giving us something to refer to when it comes to doing research in terms of mental health in Trinidad and Tobago, right? Because that's what we need more of. We need to know what's happening. We need to know what the numbers are. We need to know why it's happening. We need the research to be done. And so kudos to Dr. Hutchinson.
Right.
And so when I was doing that research, to be able to, have an informed blog regarding suicide in Trinidad, the research says it. The research says, that in Trinidad is third highest in the region for suicide, behind Suriname and Guyana.
Wow.
And everywhere else in the world, people commit suicide because of depression. The highest rates of suicide are because of depression. But the highest rates of suicide in Trinidad and Tobago are because of domestic violence.
Really?
Yes. Yes. And so the reason why we're third in the region is because of this domestic violence issue.
Oh, wow.
Exactly. So again, going back to that uniqueness.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, for sure.
So
for
not
sure,
only are we unique in culture, not only are we unique in the way we speak, in the way we talk, and the things that we do, we are also unique when it comes to social services as well.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah, because I suppose it now going, don't want to cut across, but going back to what you said, if we copy and paste efforts across the world, we definitely get it wrong.
And that's what I'm trying to say. Whereas and that's why I say kudos to Dr. Hutchinson, because it's like, okay, someone's writing about it. Someone needs to talk about what's happening here. Because again, as you just said, if we follow what's going on in the world, we're going to end up following the wrong thing.
Of course.
Right? We're going to end up making mistakes.
So we are not depression. We are domestic violence.
It's domestic violence.
Yeah, and I think globally as well, our suicide rate was pretty high compared to the rest of the world,
right? It's pretty high as well compared to other countries, right?
Wow.
So, and the reason stems back to this issue in terms of domestic violence. So these men are killing women and a lot of times killing themselves afterwards.
Yeah.
Or they might not necessarily kill the woman, but they are killing themselves. And then I started seeing clients where they're coming into my office and they would have experienced this, you know?
When you say experience this, what do you mean?
Like experience this type of domestic violence that ended up in suicide.
God.
Same type of thing, right? Same type of thing. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is so real. Like this is a thing. This is something in Trinidad where it needs to be a focus.
Yeah.
It needs to be more of a focus, you know, because I don't think it's focused on enough.
Right.
All right. And so again, the question is I think it's what's happening or what has happened in the East Indian community, right? That has driven these men to participate in domestic violence, and not only participate, but want to kill themselves afterwards.
Well, I mean, the thing about it is like we've seen now is again the difference between what you said as research versus like conjecture and anecdotal evidence. Like we like that in Trinidad. I myself like it, where you can just talk about things in general.
Where you can just talk about stuff. Like
just come up with random facts.
Random facts. Someone may see something on TV or they may Google it and it's like, okay, well, that's true.
Of course. And then argue it to the teeth.
And then argue it to the teeth. Yeah, I've seen it.
But I mean, for me, and this has been a conversation that has been happening in Trinidad in general, where people would say that idea of murder-suicide is a uniquely East Indian problem. But we never thought that based on any evidence really, just based on what you see in papers, which is not good enough. But you're saying that the evidence is there to show.
It is there.
So, I mean,
it has been written of, you know, that this is what's happening in the East Indian population, in the East Indian community.
Right. Well, I mean, the question is then, well, first for me, exposure and facing the mirror is always the best thing. You see, if I have a problem and not willing to admit that problem to myself, then I'll continue to have a problem. It probably will get deeper and deeper.
Yeah.
So I'm glad to be able to have this conversation to shed some light on that. I mean, you were saying that it might be the case that is a generational issue, or what might be the issue where one part of the population is dealing with this kind of heinous crime.
Yeah, well, I see, this is the thing. So I don't want to just say it because I haven't done the research,
sure.
Right?
Okay.
So I don't want to just say that, you know, it is. But like, if you think about it, as I said, since I've been here in 2018, I've seen it so many times, right? I've seen it in the news so many times. So that's when I said, okay, what's going on here? This is a thing, right? And then, and I do believe that if something is rooted in one specific community, it has to be, you know, if it's a theme in a community like this domestic violence issue, there has to be some type of generational trauma. You know, there has to be some type of generational trauma where, you know, it's like, oh, I see my dad do this, or I've experienced this, or it could even be in the DNA at this point. You know, generational trauma is embedded into our DNA.
Okay, but I need to understand more about that because, I mean, without the evidence, I suppose we have to do the research to figure that out. But when you say I've heard the term generational trauma a lot, not understanding fully what it is. And when you say it's in your DNA,
it's in your DNA. And so scientists now, this is recent. Okay, so like, let's say like 7 years ago, right? And spiritually, like we would say, you know, like generational curses, right?
Yeah. We say that all the time, right?
But about 7 years ago, I would have gone to a presentation done by a child psychologist where she described it as tags. So in the science world, they call it tags, right? And it is these things that are passed down into your DNA. Right? That it's your makeup of your environment, your social environment, so it's not only your social environment that will influence you, of course you are influenced biologically.
Right.
So your social structure is now scientifically known to be influenced by biology. Right? And again, they call it tags. Right. But for me, I would say it's like a generational, you know, pass down, or like a, you know, something just passed down from generation to generation. So in Canada, we use the example of like our Aboriginal peoples, right? Our Aboriginal peoples have this huge history of alcoholism and suicide, stemming back from years ago all the way till current, right? And so that is something that we look at where, okay, what's going on here? These people, these young people don't know, their ancestors from like their parents, but those parents were alcoholics. And they will be alcoholics to today.
Gotcha.
So these are the things that are passed down in your generation that, and it's trauma. It's essentially generational trauma that, influences your current behavior. All right. And so I do believe that in this East Indian community in Trinidad and Tobago, there is some type of generational trauma, reoccurring generational trauma that influences the socialization of domestic violence as well as suicide.
So is it fair to say, like, I mean, I would not have known anything about the idea of like ancestors basically passing, like, because you're talking about people who you never met or never met you,
Yes.
great grandparents and so on.
Yes.
But in the household itself, I would have to assume that if you grew up in a household where there's domestic violence, is it that there's a likelihood or the chances are that people who grow up in that house will grow up to be abused or to abuse? Is that a fair thing?
So what it is that the likelihood is that if you experience ACE, so ACE is adverse childhood experiences.
Okay.
Right? So adverse childhood experiences are like, low socioeconomic, where, you might be living under the poverty line, or maybe having a single parent, or maybe, experiencing domestic violence, seeing violence, hearing violence, being exposed to drugs, being exposed to things like that as a child. So the likelihood of you experiencing trauma is higher if you lived in adverse conditions.
Okay.
Right? So domestic violence is, of course, an adverse condition.
Sure.
So you experiencing trauma and displaying signs of symptoms of that trauma are going to be more likely, yes, if you've seen domestic violence in your house.
I understood. So I guess the intervention really is to help people deal with that trauma, is it?
Exactly. And so one thing I realize is that we're focused on the victims, or we're trying to be focused on the victims. So we have things that would have started like the new gender-based violence unit in the TTPS, and they're coming together with NGOs and doing all of this work. And I think it's great work. But I think that the focus is on providing services to the victims. I believe that we need now to also focus on providing services to the perpetrators.
Micah, I agree 1,000%. I've said for a long time that you see, in Trinidad and Tobago, the definition of a victim is too narrow. You see, if I'm in a household and I abuse everybody in my household, I've always felt that they are going to need help, but I need help too. And nobody wants to, there's no way, it's difficult for me to come and admit, hey guys, I beat my wife on a regular basis. But if somebody's making a report, what we do is we cast away who we call the aggressor or the person who's doing the abusing, and we try to help the victims. But I've always felt like this, like my father is my guy. I love my father. I don't know what he could do in this life now that will make me turn against him.
Yes.
Now let's assume I live in a household with him and he's abusive to my mother. I ain't gonna like that at all. But I don't know that the love for my father changes to the point where I'm comfortable seeing him locked away or so that and even if it turns to that where I get to hate my father.
Yes.
I feel like that's something that I should get help to deal with, because now I've lost a mother, I lost a father. It's like where are all these children getting that support to help with that trauma? And kudos to you and everybody else who's involved in that for doing that work. And even if it's a start, it's a start. But I hear you loud and clear. It's like where is there the support for the men? And I don't want to call it support, because people don't believe that they need support. People believe they should be cast away. So maybe support is not the best word.
Away. Exactly.
But I think we have to understand it.
Focus on the perpetrator, because if we don't focus on the perpetrator, then it's going to keep happening.
Of course.
Because if we've established that it's a generational experience,
right,
then what we're doing is we're allowing it to happen for the next generation.
Oh my God.
So let's say we cast away the father now. Okay, so we cast him away because he's done wickedness. Sure. So we cast him away. As you said, what happens to the son?
Yeah.
Right? What happens to the son who maybe would have experienced watching his father commit suicide or watching his father beat his mother for all those years and then commit suicide afterward?
What happens to the daughter in that household who believes that this is what a relationship should look like?
Exactly. Until we start getting these men help, I think we're just going to continue seeing this cycle of abuse, and suicide, because it's twofold. It's abuse and it's suicide. It's multidimensional is what's going on here. Because not only is it domestic violence, there is the issue of domestic violence, which is a whole issue on its own. And then there's the issue of suicide, which is a whole issue on its own.
Well, and let me say this, right? As a complete lay person and a street guy, you see, domestic violence is something that both the perpetrator and the abused can, I feel, work and recover from. Suicide is not. Suicide is final. In other words, if I commit suicide, it's the end of my life. Other people have to deal with it, but I'm out of here, right?
Yeah.
So I'm thinking that I've always felt that a big part of the trend with murder-suicide is that the perpetrator knows that they cannot face society after that.
Yes.
There's no help, there's no reform, there's nothing. Because it's either the death you bring on yourself or the death that society and the court and everybody will put on you. So I always wonder if maybe, like you said, I don't know if it's systems in place or what should be done where people can get help. Because think of this, right? If we married and we have problems, let's say the problems are not domestic violence, we having problems with communication, let's say.
Yeah.
There are ways where both of us could get counseling. I'm very, very poor at communicating and you're very good at it. But when I go to the counseling session, nobody treats me like, they treat me as part of the marriage, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And we both work together and help. But I'm wondering in locally here, or maybe based on your experience abroad, can that be something that we approach where counseling? Suppose I've hit my wife or I've been beating my wife for some time and I see some light and I want help. Is that something you could access?
I don't know if there's any specific programs right now.
Mm-hmm.
I know that there are some non-for-profits, because I'm not going to say that there's nothing going on.
Sure.
I know that there's a non-for-profit. I would have just came across it a couple of days ago, and it is Men Against Violence Against Women.
Yeah, I know that organization. They do a great job.
So there's that organization. Mm-hmm. And then there's also another guy who has an organization specifically for men and fathers. I can't remember what it's called, but he's also really well known as well.
Right.
So I know that there are groups out there, right? I just don't know, how accessible the services are. And this is the thing. I see that there's NGOs out there. I see there's non-for-profits out there. How much support are these non-for-profits getting from the government?
For sure. Ask them. They'll tell you how little.
Right? And so that is one of my biggest pet peeves. That is one of my biggest issues, is because there are actually people who want to do the work.
Yeah, I think people doing the work.
There are people who want to do the work. There are people who said, listen, this is my passion. This is what I believe in. I want to do the work. But then they're getting no support from the government.
Sure.
We have programs, we have non-for-profit organizations in Toronto that are annually funded by the government. Right. Annually funded. Big, huge money. Big dollars.
Sure. Yeah.
Millions of dollars. I was working for a non-for-profit before I left to come to Trinidad, and we were funded $1.something million a year to do the work we were doing. And we were a small organization. Right. So much less the bigger ones out there.
Well, I mean, that's why I guess based on your experience, you say that it's just not a priority for us.
Exactly. One of my biggest pet peeves is that the government does not partner with the non-for-profit organizations in the community.
Right.
Because the government, they I don't know if they decide, well, we're going to do all the work for ourselves. What?
Yeah, I mean,
but until the day that you decide that, listen, we cannot do all the work, where you realize we cannot do all the work. And if we funded these non-for-profits to do the work, it will be much easier on everybody involved. Mm-hmm. Right? Because I'm not saying just give the non-for-profits money.
No,
I'm
I
saying
understand what you're
fund
saying.
them, hold them accountable to the money that you're giving them, meaning that they're giving you budgets, itemized budgets. You're ensuring that they're sticking to their budgets and doing what you guys have to do to hold them accountable and ensure that they're doing the work in the community. But if those stakeholder partnerships and collaborations were happening, I promise you we would have had better social services going on right now.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yes, because my experience, as I said, back home in Canada, it's the non-for-profits who do all the work. The government doesn't do the work. The government gives the money. All they do is give the money. The non-for-profits do all the work.
We have to grow to that point, if you ask me, in Trinidad, because that is not that's not a unique problem in the social service space in this country. The government here gets very, very involved. The government does the work in a lot of areas. And
Exactly.
if the government,
Exactly.
if we reach, and it creates a certain dependency on the government as well. If the government just put,
Exactly.
look at Carnival as an example. Carnival is cancelled, as they say.
Yes.
And the protection of culture, something else that is very, very close to me. When you look at the institutions charged with protecting our culture, our carnival and mass and steel band and so on, all of them are set up as government organizations, and there's it's so tricky. It's like, why not get the people who, like you say, because I mean, when you speak, you hear the passion in your voice about
Oh,
the
100%.
field. So,
Yes.
so you might be the best person, or somebody in your field might be the best person to do that, rather than ministers should set policy and put structures and infrastructure in place. And as you say, do the funding
Yes.
for tax dollars to make sure that, and as
Yes.
once that's done, the goal of the government then is to ensure that, okay, if I'm giving NGOs money, is
Yes.
the problem being solved? Is it getting better? And I guess we're in a
Exactly.
situation where it's not getting better, because
Yes.
the attacks on women, I have a hard time understanding it. I mean, talking to you helps, but I have a hard time understanding it just from the standpoint of a man. Like, I keep asking myself, what this woman had to do? Does she have a next man? What's the problem? I trying to figure out what's the issue that causes you to get not just violent, but so violent to the point of killing. There was one earlier this year where the guy showed up at the car park outside
Workplace.
her work. You remember that?
Yes. Yes. I remember.
Oh my God, in a public place, 8 o'clock in the morning when people going
Yes.
to work. And I think the issue with
Exactly.
her was, I think her mom, and they said she was trying to leave him,
Yes.
and she had restrict. How many times have we heard that same exact story over and over? You're trying to leave. And it's just hard for me to understand, boy. And the thing about it is, you're right. Like the women need help beyond just the therapy and the counseling. A lot of women need help to escape. And if you're in situations like those, you have to figure out a way out, because
Exactly.
the end point is clear where you're going to get to. It's been repeated many, many times. But what happens from your experience with children in those situations that you describe, when a child is in a household where there's domestic violence? Let's say everybody lives, no murder, suicide, or anything. And how you help children in those cases, or you've had experiences like those?
So yeah, we definitely, have the services. And that's why, again, I'm not going to say that the work is not being done.
Sure.
It's the way the work is being done,
Right.
And so Children's Authority is trying. They are trying to do good work. They are trying to, what they would do is that they'll do the investigations, try to find out what's happening inside of the home, where, if the children need to be removed, they'll remove them. If they need to provide some type of service, therapy for the kids, they'll do that as well, right? For the family members too. So they're trying, but again, there's a disconnect,
right?
There's a disconnect somewhere along the lines. We're disconnected.
Sure.
Because what's happening is that we work in silos, unfortunately, in Trinidad.
Yeah.
And so one organization will not work with another organization in order to get the job done. And in order for social services to flourish and to be at its best, all institutions have to be working together.
Yeah, it had to be cohesive.
They have to be cohesive. So meaning that Ministry of Education needs to be working with Ministry of Health, needs to be working with Children's Authority, needs to be working with the non-for-profits, needs to be working with the police, everybody needs to work together.
So let me ask you, in a country like in Canada, where you have situations like those, the authorities have the ability to remove the child from the situation once they know what it is. Okay.
Yes. But in Trinidad too, they do have the ability to remove the child as well.
Okay. And then what happens is, one of the homes, what happens with the child?
So right now, they might look for a family member who's willing to take the child.
Okay.
Right. So they'll go for kinship care. They have foster parents. They have the homes. So they have options, right?
Okay.
So if it is a situation where the investigation team goes in and they realize that the child is to be removed, they'll do their whole assessment and everything. And then, if they realize that, okay, this child really needs to be removed based on whatever this child is experiencing, they will remove the child from the home.
Oh, understood.
At that point, looking for family members, looking for foster care, or looking for, one of the homes, space in the homes to put the child in.
Okay, so when the child is moved, does the state still or the what is the child care authority? Are they involved with the child? Do they provide the counseling? Okay.
So This is where I find that there's a bit of a disconnect now.
Okay.
So I find that children's authorities hiring practices are a little off.
Hiring
So
practices?
they're not really, their hiring practices are off.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not hiring the particular staff that are needed to do the job.
Understood. Okay.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so with that happening, it's like, it's like, okay, the job's not getting done to the best ability because the right person is not being hired to do the job. So that's one.
Mm-hmm.
That's one. And then the disconnect also happens where, again, is that no communication or no partnerships, no collaboration. So the services that might be necessary are not getting tapped into because of the lack of communication between, institutions or stakeholders.
Okay.
And social services in Trinidad runs very top down. It runs very corporate, unfortunately, right? Which is, we need to revamp that. We need to stop that.
But all those things are in the way of the person getting the care that they need.
All those things are in the way of the person, the child, getting the care that they need. So it running very top down means that the person on the ground who's responsible for the child may not be allowed to make a phone call or send an email without talking to their supervisor or something like that. And so that's hindering the child getting services. Are you kidding me?
Of course.
If you hired me to do a job. You are supposed to trust that I have the ability to do my job. I shouldn't have to ask my supervisor to send an email before I send an email.
I understand what you mean.
All these things are hindering this red tape because, one time I made a comment saying that, Trinidad should be just painted with one red line of red tape around the entire country. Right? Because, and red tape is not to exist in social services.
I understand it. It has to be fast. It has to be quick. Yeah.
In the corporate world, I understand. Corporate world is different. But if you continue to run social services the way you run corporate, people are going to miss out on the treatment that they need.
Well, this is the way I'm thinking of it, right? Let's assume you have because with the police placing so much emphasis on community-based police or policing, I would think that if something happens home by me here, I'm in Shogunas, and wife run up by the police station, something happened and she makes a report. In the ideal world, I would think that the socials, everything kicks in at the same time. So whether it's to remove the child, to help the woman, protect her, restraining order, all these things, and the counseling that is needed to help with situations like those, and the financial support and the housing, to me, if it doesn't all kick in at the same time, you're going to have a problem. You're going to have this problem that we have in now.
Yes.
And the problem that we have in now is that woman in Couva who was killed in front of her job had a restraining order. So many of them have restraining orders already, and they did what is the textbook thing to do if you're in situations like those. Exactly. You find a way out, you get the restraining orders, get the police, get the courts involved. Now, unless that operates in a very, very flat way, or everything, the only thing that's being done is that the help takes longer to get there, if it gets there at all.
Yes.
And we're finding ourselves over and over in situations where it's too late. By the time something happens, it's too late. As you say, you have a lot of people on the ground who are doing the work, and if the bureaucracy is stopping the work from getting done, it's going to be too late for more and more and more people.
Exactly.
But boy, we ain't going to solve this on this podcast, but I think the main thing that I want to get done, with your help, of course, is to continue to shed light on the things, because we can't keep acting like we are not who we are.
Yes, exactly.
This is our society. Women under pressure. A lot of them scared. A lot of the abuse that reaches the newspaper is just a small representation, or the most violent representation of problems that we have every day.
Exactly.
Every day, and people doing what they have to do. And the funny thing about it is that you see, this COVID situation, Micah, is going to force us to face this more and more.
Exactly.
Because we're seeing globally where domestic violence is increasing.
Exactly. All mental health issues are increasing.
Yeah, for sure.
A lot of different things are happening right now, and so it as you said, it's going to force us to look at the bigger picture, force us to actually say, okay, what's happening right now?
Listen, I hope so, and I like talking to you because you're very direct, and I think you have the badge of not being here for so long that it is easier for you to talk about some things in a very, very direct way, which I enjoy, because we can't just we pretend a lot as Trinidad. And the nice thing about it that COVID forcing us to, you see, in this country we have a celebration around the corner at all times. We
Yes,
always have Diwali, Eid,
exactly.
Christmas, Carnival.
Exactly. There's always happy time,
We have an escape.
and I love that. And I love that. Don't get me wrong, because, moving to Trinidad, Trinidad is known as, some of the happiest people in the world and stuff like that.
Of course.
Right? So I love that, there's that outlet, I love that there's the outlets and, but again, I think there's a time and place, right?
Of course.
And I think we need to prioritize, again, social services and the people, just like we would prioritize carnival.
Sure.
So I'll give you an example.
Mm-hmm.
I made a video one day because I had brought my son to one of the local healthcare centers in St. James.
Right.
And this was around carnival time. And I was going to some fetes that I haven't gone to before. Like I went to Fatima this year.
Well, listen, St. James and Fatima, you have me already. You're going good.
Yes. So I went to Fatima this year for the first time, right? Had an amazing experience,
Nice.
And seeing certain of the, you go to these fetes and you see things, you see moko jumbies and, you see the fires and you see you see the effort that's put into the production of carnival, and the money that is spent. Nobody can't tell me that big dollars are not being spent on these productions. A couple years ago, I went to Tribe's band launching for the first time. Yeah. That was a theatrical production.
Of course, top shelf.
When I mean top notch, I was getting, these wonderful coconuts with Hennessy in it. And as I said, it was a theatrical production.
Right.
And so I know that the money that had to be put out, to create that production had to be millions,
For sure.
and then I go to, again, just around carnival time, I bring my son to the healthcare center in St. James.
Right.
And there wasn't even, we couldn't even sit beside each other because all the chairs were broken. There wasn't even adequate seating in this area. There was no fans. We had to sit outside in a waiting room outside. There was no fans, no AC, no to ensure. And this is my son we're talking about. I'm not talking about myself. I'm talking about a child.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So number one, we couldn't sit beside each other because all of the chairs were broken. Number two, they didn't even have a little fan.
Of course.
To block you from the heat. And it's like, okay, wait a minute.
Yeah, where's the priority?
Where is the priority here? And so that disappoints me because I don't think it's a problem to prioritize carnival. Carnival is a wonderful outlet, but it is a problem when you prioritize carnival and you don't prioritize the healthcare of your people.
Well, this is the thing. My theory on that, Mike, is that we in Trinidad rather escape from our problems than face them. And I spend a lot of money in therapy to learn this for myself, so I'm not exempt from it.
Exactly.
But because we always have Easter around the corner, and then there's Carnival, and then there's the summer, and then there's Diwali and Eid and Christmas, we always have a celebration nearby. So no matter what's the pain, or use the word trauma, no matter what the trauma is that we face as a society, think of the headlines. I don't know if there's such a thing as headline trauma, but I surely have it. Yes. There's no need to face it if I know in 2 weeks' time Fatima Fete coming up.
Exactly.
You get me? There's always this escape. So what we're doing is funding the escapes so that we don't have to deal with the problem. But I guess this is why I'm glad to have this conversation and hopefully to have more so that we could just continue to shed light. We're never going to be able to solve these societal issues on a 1 hour call. But I think what it does for us as a society is force us to look at ourselves. We also in a state where the headline comes up, is a big conversation for 2 or 3 days. And then it goes out. For people like me, it goes away. While for people like yourselves who in the field, you all understand that there are children who are there. What happens? We never hear stories. Well, I don't want to say never, but I don't ever see this story where the child, what went on with them? So there was a murder, suicide. Exactly. What happened to the child? What school they go in? What they grow up to be? How are they now? And until we address these things, and as you say, I like the way you put it, until we prioritize these things, we're going to just keep facing headlines like these, and then we're going to drink away our sorrows.
Exactly. I love that you said that. I love that you said that because I would say that, I don't know what the exact number is, but I think it's about 75% of the population are functioning alcoholics.
Oh my God, I hope not.
Right? I don't know, but I think it's a big number. I think it's a big number. And I say that it's a big number because after work lines. Okay, so when I first moved here, right, I started to participate in after work lines. Right. So on a Wednesday, slam bam in the middle of the week, on a Tuesday, any given day, after work, we're going to the bar. Right? And we're not drinking one drink. We're not drinking two drinks.
You can't stand up on 1 foot. You need to drink.
Thank you. Oh, I'm glad you said it, because there was a time where I actually fell down. There was, yes. And I'm being honest. Like, you know what I mean? I'm not lying here.
Sure.
There was a time that I actually fell. And we were in a restaurant. We were on the patio in the restaurant, and I fell. And I was like, I had to reevaluate. And I said, wait a minute, Micah. This is not you.
No, sound like a damn good time to me. I saw
it was a great time. but I'm not a type of person who drinks like that. Like, it's not in me to drink like that. You know what I mean? And then have to wake up for work the next morning. And I would wake up for work the next morning and feel and look like crap, while my colleagues, the same people I were drinking with, they look like sunshine. Yeah,
that's it. I mean, that's when you know you have your Trinidadian card.
Exactly. And I'm like, oh my God, how did you guys even do that? I'm like, this is crazy. The fact that you guys could wake up and look like sunshine. I'm over here, almost like, dying, And it's like, okay, this is clearly a part of the culture.
It is.
Right?
It is.
Which I don't want to be judgmental towards it, but I am going to say that we have to be mindful, and we have to say to ourselves, is it that, are we just having fun? Are we just liming? Or are we essentially drinking away our problems?
Well, I believe I know for sure for Carnival, I drink away my problems. I'm not sober at any point during those 2 days.
And that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's what I'm saying.
I can accept
because
that.
you have the ability to drink away your problems, it makes it seem like problems don't exist.
Well, especially when the opportunity to drink away your problems always present. Like, if you want to see a live example of what you're talking about there, like, spend some time in the country. So come out to Port of Spain, Chagonos, and Remanting, and go down in the country and see what the bars are like, and the fact that the bar is a central point for a lot of those communities. In that they open very early in the morning, people are there all day. It's part of who we are. But
people are there all day, exactly. And even before I would have moved down, I came down once, and me and my cousin, we decided to wake up early and take an early walk. And this was at about 6 o'clock in the morning, and the community bar was already open.
It probably didn't close. With
customers. Yeah, and I was like, okay, does no one see this as an issue?
No, that wasn't open. Right? That was probably open since the night before. They probably never closed off. So they till and I'm from St. James, so I grew up. That was so normal for me.
That's the norm. And even in St. James right now, like, even with Corona happening, if you drive down St. James, let's say between 8 and 10, St. James is bumping.
Listen, I grew up on the street where there was a bar called Smokey and Bunty on St. James, on the Western Main Road.
Remember.
You remember that? I grew up on the street right behind Smokey and Bunty. So there was is every single day of the week. There was a Universal bar, Smokey and Bunty, the college. There's a list of them. Chairs. There's a bunch of bars in one small space. And to me, as a child growing up, it was absolutely normal for me to go get a drink at the bar. Well, like, when I say a drink now, like, I would go buy Orchard or something. It's not abnormal for me to be around a lot of alcohol, and there's a horse racing pool right there. That whole it's just what life is. Like you say, it's just normal to us. But
it's just cultural, you know. And it's and the thing about it is, again, if it's a part of the culture, I don't want to be too critical, because culture is culture. You know what I mean? Culture is culture. So I don't want to be too critical onto somebody else's culture, because I wouldn't want somebody to be too critical to my culture.
Right.
So I don't want to be too critical where I'm saying, okay, this is bad, and, Trinidad needs to stop drinking, and alcohol is a bad thing. No, I don't want to come off as that. Mm-hmm. What I want to do is for us to be mindful. I want for us to evaluate. I want for us to critically assess the situation.
Yeah.
Is it that we are having fun? Or is it that sometimes we are drinking away our issues?
Well, listen, Micah,
right?
I'm with you 100% because it's, for me, I want to see Trinidad become a great place. I want to see it become a
Hmm.
storied country about the way of life here and so on.
Exactly. Because it's so capable.
It is. It is. And then there's nothing in our way except ourselves. So I'm glad
Except
that I'm
exactly,
glad that you take the
exactly.
viewpoint that you take, because all those things are our culture, yes. But the domestic violence and the rape and the murder suicides, unfortunately, is a part of the culture as well. So the earlier we could start talking about it and start addressing it, is the faster we'll get. And then maybe when that changes, some other parts of the culture might change as well, as culture tends to do. It's all interrelated. But I mean, business before business. You doing some things that I really like and appreciate with your company, Cope Counseling, right?
Yes, Cope Counselling Services.
Right. So you were telling me that your goal really is to start providing a space where people could get more therapy or more access to therapy. If you could tell me some about that.
Yes, yes. So I would have started as a private practice. So when I was working for the Children's Authority, to make a little extra money and to also, fill a gap. A lot of service providers, when we see a gap, it's like it's like a tickle.
Yeah, you have to go for it.
It's like yes. So when you see a gap, it's like, oh my gosh, I gotta fill this gap. I gotta help to fill this gap. And
Right.
so when I seen the mental health gap, I was like, oh, wait a minute, there's something for me to do. There's work to be done in terms of mental health.
Right.
And in Toronto, mental health is huge.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The mental health field is humongous. Like there's so many services and collaborations and just so much towards mental health. And so I was like, okay, wait a minute, Trinidad, there's some potential here. There is some room
Yeah, we have some
for us to
opportunities for
up.
sure.
Yes, there is some room to up the mental health game.
Good.
And so when I seen that, I was like, okay, this is where I'm going to go.
Okay, let's
I'm
go.
going to hit the mental health. Yes, I'm going to hit the mental health field and I'm going to hit the ground running with that because, I want to help. And
That's
so
really good.
initially I started out as a private practice where I would just see clients individually as well as couples and groups in order to, again, provide mental health services. And then I realized that only people who could afford to come see me would come see me. But there's a whole other part of the population who can't afford to come see me. And they're essentially not being served.
Yeah, I think so. It's expensive.
It's expensive. Therapy is expensive and quality therapy is expensive.
Of course.
So all the things that are free right now, honestly, I'm going to be real, they're subpar. They're not amazing services.
Right.
They're accessible because they're free, but they're not great.
Sure.
I don't think persons are getting the quality of services that they should be. And so I decided to turn my private practice into a nonprofit organization.
Okay.
So that we could provide free services to persons who cannot access it. So very shortly, we will be having community group programming,
right,
free of charge for our participants.
That's really good. I mean, especially that you're doing it community based. That's really, really good. I think it's necessary.
So we've been able to partner with a few organizations, bigger organizations,
right,
to assist us in terms of spacing and stuff like that. And with that, we will of course, because we work through volunteers and everything like that.
Sure.
So with that, we will start the work.
This is good. I think you already started the work, so that's good. I see.
The work has definitely already started. But so hopefully soon, we're looking, very soon, very shortly, our programs will be, up and running for persons to access.
It's so needed because one of the things I found funny when I was trying to go to therapy, I struggled to find somebody here. Maybe it's just me, really, to be honest. I just didn't want to face anybody here. So I went for one of those online services, and it adds up. And I asked the person who I was working with, the counselor, to send me. I had her fill out one of those medical claim forms, right? And she did it and everything. And then when I sent it to the insurance company, they said that they can't pay a claim for it because she, I can't remember what was the words they used, but she basically couldn't prescribe any medication or anything. So she didn't fall under the title that they could pay a claim for. And Micah, to be honest with you, the claim would have made no difference to the amount I was paying her anyway. Because it was literally something like $300 for the year or something like that. It was ridiculously small.
Yes,
so
exactly.
I'm not sure why.
So that's what happened. That's what happened. Go ahead. You were saying you're not sure why.
No, but is it that no, I'm not sure why it's not covered. But is it like in your experience in Canada, if you have a medical plan, is things like seeing a counselor or therapist or mental health care included? Like, would it typically cover, or is that?
Yes. And so this is the thing. I think that because, again, social services in Trinidad is such not a priority, we don't know how to do things correctly. We're not doing things as should be done. Right. So the reason why, you probably ran into certain issues is because, again, usually in Trinidad, when they are covering social services or when they're covering therapy, it has to be under a psychiatrist.
Right. That's what it was. It had to be a psychiatrist.
Exactly.
And she was a therapist or
she
a
was
counselor.
Probably a psychotherapist, MSW.
Psychotherapist, that's right.
Yes. See, and that's the difference. Back home, it's usually you get psychology, you get MSW, you get psychiatry, you get everything under the umbrella in terms of what's on your benefits.
So right? Get the help that you need, basically.
You get the help that you need.
Yeah.
Because psychiatrists don't counsel. They diagnose.
Well, that's what. Yeah, I guess that's what they were saying. Is somebody? I guess that you're right. Is a psychiatrist that could diagnose?
Yes, their job is to diagnose. So they're the medical persons in our field. Right. So in our field, you go to the psychiatrist. I will refer to a psychiatrist when I see that the mental health issues need a diagnosis. Right. Gotcha, so it's so severe that it needs a clinical diagnosis. But sometimes it's not that severe. Sometimes it's anxiety, it's depression, and we can do that through talk therapy. We can handle those things.
Sure.
Sometimes there's signs and symptoms of schizophrenia, where we need a diagnosis at that point.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, so the thing is, I guess we could agree that we have a long way to go. But I mean, I kept you here for a long time. But I want to thank you for not just the work that you're doing, but for coming back to Trinidad, which is great. We need more people like you to lend your expertise. Course. And I think that seeing the gaps and trying to help with the gaps is one thing, but going as far as to identify groups who mightn't be able to afford it and trying to provide a service for that is commendable. And I appreciate it because I think we will benefit. My own experience with getting help around mental health is that it takes patience. You have to be kind of patient with yourself to see the results that you want to see. And I would imagine that is even more so with a society. So I thank you for doing the work that you're doing now. I'm sure we'll get the dividends from it in time to come. But if you want to give people your social media handles and stuff so that they know where to find you.
So our IG, that's where usually we'll post a lot of our updates and stuff like that. So if you kind of want to keep most current with what we're doing, you'll follow us on IG. And that is Cope_Counseling, COPE_counseling with 2 L's. We have a website, so you can go on CopeCounselingTT.org, www.CopeCounselingTT.org. And on our website is where you'll find all of our programs, the services that we offer. You can also email us, info@CopeCounselingTT.org. And then you can just simply give us a call. If you're not really that tech savvy or you don't have social media, you can call us at 324-1244.
All right, great. Well, I appreciate it, Micah. This was really a good conversation. I hope to have many more like this because I think we have to just continue putting it out there and let's face some of our problems as a society.
Exactly. I hear you. So thanks for having me. Thanks for having the conversation. And, thanks for being one of those people out there that are actually talking about it, because that's what we need. We just need to talk, in order to spread that awareness.
I appreciate that. We'll continue to do it. Thanks so much.
For sure. All right, Corey. Take care.
All right, Micah. Thanks.
All right.
Okay, bye-bye. All right, so there we have it. I mean, a million thanks to Micah, and I appreciate her coming on and talk about it. If we could get on again to talk about issues like these, we will. And as I say, I'm going to continue to reach out to different institutions and people who have dealt with this hands-on, because it's better we talk about it all the time and get a better understanding of it. Because once it happened in this society, in my little country, I feel like it's a part of me. Yes, that's the way I feel about it. And we can't just continue to stand by and pretend it's not happening until it happens. Because this is what people dealing with all the time. And as I said, I gave the numbers up front, right? 800-SAVE, 800-7283. If you're listening to this and you're on either side of the fence or you know people who dealing with it, I encourage you to call the lines. They have people like Micah to help. Same thing with where children are concerned. The Children Authority that Micah was talking about, they also have a hotline for the case of abuse of children, and that number is 800. Where the number go now? 800-4321. So that's the child line, and get in contact with the Children's Authority. There's a site up called Trinidad Shelter that has a lot of the information for different offices in different areas of the country and things to do like rape crisis. Families in Action. I used to go to Families in Action at one time, and they have a lot of support, or a lot of people who you could reach out to. So you might be feeling alone, but it's better to start the process where outreach is concerned. As Micah was saying, our systems locally here, they're not perfect, right? But a lot of people working there behind the scenes to help you. And if it is you need that help, reach out. So the people don't get overwhelmed or overburdened by the system itself, like we're talking about. The people there are going to do their endeavor best to help you. So that's where we are. That's conversation 4. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will talk to you all next week.